Welcome to Mystic Sleep Tales. Before we begin this evening's quiet journey together, I want you to take a moment, just a small moment, to settle yourself completely. This is not a request for dramatic adjustment or sudden movement, but rather an invitation to notice where you are, how you are positioned, and whether there might be any small refinement that would make the next hour or so more comfortable for you. Perhaps your pillow could be shifted just slightly to the left or right, perhaps drawn a little higher beneath your head or pushed a bit lower. Perhaps the blanket that covers you might be pulled closer to your chin or loosened if you find yourself too warm. Perhaps your arms, which may have fallen into their resting position without conscious thought, would be more comfortable arranged differently. One beneath the pillow, perhaps, or both at your sides, or folded across your chest in that particular way that your body has learned over years of sleeping. That configuration which signals to your deepest self that rest is now permitted, that the day has ended and the night's restoration can begin. Take all the time you need for these small adjustments. There is no hurry tonight. There is no destination we are racing toward, no revelation waiting at the end of our time together that requires we speed through what comes before. We have the entire evening ahead of us, or at least as much of it as you need, and we will move through it slowly, carefully, observing rather than experiencing, watching rather than participating, allowing the gentle rhythm of ordinary domestic routine to wash over us like a tide, slow and patient, and ultimately irresistible. Are you comfortable now? Truly comfortable, in a way that means you could remain exactly as you are for the next hour without needing to shift or adjust. Good. Then let us begin, not with drama or excitement, not with mystery or danger, but with something far more conducive to rest. The simple observation of an ordinary evening in an ordinary house on an ordinary street in London during the closing decades of the 19th century, when Queen Victoria still sat upon her throne and the British Empire stretched across the globe, and the modern world we know was just beginning to emerge from the older world that had preceded it. Let your breathing slow as we begin. There's no need to control it consciously, no need to count breaths or match them to any particular rhythm. Simply allow your breath to find its own natural pace, that steady in and out that has continued since the moment of your birth and will continue until the moment of your death. That most fundamental of all bodily functions, requiring no thought, no effort, no attention, simply happening because you are alive and your body knows what to do. As your breathing settles, let your awareness of your body begin to soften. You are still conscious of lying in bed, certainly still aware of the mattress beneath you and the covering above you, and the pillow cradling your head, but these sensations need not be sharp or demanding. They can fade slightly, can become background rather than foreground, so that your attention is free to wander elsewhere, to leave your immediate physical surroundings and travel to another place, another time, where we will spend this evening together, simply watching, simply observing, asking nothing of you but your gentle attention. The place we're going is not exotic or strange. There are no foreign lands involved, no ancient civilizations, no mysterious ruins or hidden treasures. We are traveling only a short distance from where you lie now. If you're in London, perhaps only a few streets away. If you're elsewhere, then a journey by train or ship, or if you live in an era when such things are possible, by aeroplane, but in any case a journey to a real place, a place that existed and in some form may still exist, though much changed from what it was in the time we are about to visit. We are going to a street, a particular street in London, though I will not tell you its name because it does not matter, because this street could be any of 100 similar streets that were built in the middle years of Victoria's reign, when London was expanding rapidly outward from its medieval core, absorbing surrounding villages and farmland, covering the countryside with brick and mortar, creating those endless terraces of narrow houses that still characterize so much of the cities. Residential areas. The street we are visiting runs roughly north to south, sloping gently downhill so that from its northern end, on a clear day, one can glimpse a thin slice of the Thames in the distance, though on most days the view is obscured by the smoke and fog that characterize London's atmosphere in this period, that thick, yellowish haze that earns the name pea souper and turns the city's air into something almost tangible, something you can taste and feel as well as see. The street itself is lined on both sides with houses, terraced houses, meaning that each shares its walls with its neighbors on either side, creating an unbroken facade of brick that extends the length of each block. These are not grand houses, not the mansions of the wealthy with their imposing porticos and spacious gardens, but neither are they the cramped, squalid dwellings of the truly poor, those tenements in the East End where entire families live in single rooms and sanitation is rudimentary at best. These are middle-class houses, the homes of clerks and shopkeepers, of schoolmasters and minor civil servants, of commercial travelers and bookkeepers, and all those others who occupy that broad middle stratum of Victorian society, neither rich nor poor, neither master nor servant, but somewhere in between, comfortable enough to employ perhaps one or two servants, but not wealthy enough to maintain the large staffs that grander households require. Each house is narrow, perhaps 15 or 18 feet wide, but extends back a considerable distance from the street, with 3 floors above ground, and in most cases, a basement below where the kitchen and scullery are located. The facades are brick, left bare in their natural red-brown color, or sometimes painted white or cream, with stone sills beneath the windows and stone steps leading up to the front doors. Each house has a small front garden, no more than a few feet deep, enclosed by low iron railings, and most of these gardens are bare at this time of year, the winter having stripped away any greenery that might have softened their appearance during the warmer months. The street is not busy. This is a residential area, not a commercial one, and there are no shops or businesses here to draw traffic. During the day, one might see the occasional carriage, a delivery wagon bringing coal or groceries, a maid sweeping the front steps or polishing the brass door knocker, a nursemaid walking with children, but these are infrequent events. For the most part, the street is quiet, the kind of place where neighbors know one another by sight, if not by name, where routines are regular and predictable, where life proceeds according to patterns established over years and repeated day after day with only minor variations. It is evening now, the specific evening we have come to observe, and the winter darkness has fallen early, as it always does in December. The sun set hours ago, somewhere around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by now, at nearly 8 o'clock in the evening, the darkness is complete. Above, the sky is overcast, the clouds reflecting back the city's lights in a dull orange glow that is neither day nor night, but something in between, that peculiar urban twilight that persists through all the hours of darkness, making true night impossible, turning the sky into a low, oppressive ceiling that seems to press down upon the city beneath. Along the street, the gas lamps are burning. They stand at intervals, perhaps one every 60 or 70 feet, tall cast iron posts topped with glass enclosed lanterns, and within each lantern a gas flame burns with that characteristic greenish-yellow light that gas produces, a light that is steadier than candle flame, but still flickers slightly, responding to drafts and changes in gas pressure, creating shadows that seem to move and shift even when nothing else is moving. These lamps do not illuminate the street brightly. Gaslight is weak compared to the electric lighting that will replace it in the coming decades, and each lamp creates only a small pool of illumination around its base, leaving considerable darkness in between. A person walking along the street must pass from one pool of light into darkness and then into another pool of light, and in those dark intervals between the lamps, it becomes difficult to see more than a few feet ahead, difficult to distinguish objects or recognize faces, so that even a familiar street can take on an unfamiliar, slightly threatening aspect once night has fallen. But we are not walking along the street. We are standing still, observing from a fixed position, and our attention is focused not on the street itself, but on one particular house halfway along the terrace on the western side of the street. From the front, this house looks much like all the others, the same narrow brick facade, the same arrangement of windows, the same stone steps leading to the front door. But we are not looking at the front of the house. We're looking at its side, at a narrow alley that runs between this house and the one next to it, an alley barely wide enough for a person to walk through comfortably, and at the side of the house that faces this alley, there is a window. It is a tall window, taller than it is wide, divided into 12 panes by narrow wooden glazing bars, 3 panes across and 4 panes high, and behind this window, visible even from where we stand in the darkness of the alley, there is light. Not bright light. This is not a room prepared for company or for any kind of formal activity, but the softer, dimmer light of a single oil lamp turned low, supplemented by the reddish glow of a coal fire burning in a range. This window, this light, is where we will spend our evening. We will stand here in the cold darkness of the December night, invisible observers, watching the interior of this room, this kitchen, as the evening proceeds, as the last tasks of the day are completed, as the household settles towards sleep. We will not intrude. We will not enter. We will not speak or make ourselves known. We will simply watch, as one might watch a scene painted on canvas or a play performed upon a stage, except that what we are watching is not art, but life, not performance, but reality, the ordinary continuation of an ordinary evening in an ordinary house, unremarkable in every way except for the fact that we have chosen to pay attention to it, to pause in our own busy lives, and simply observe someone else's quiet routine. Let your eyes adjust now to the dimness. Let yourself see what I am seeing, standing here in this imaginary alley in this reconstructed past, looking through this window into this kitchen. The glass is old, not perfectly flat, creating slight distortions in the view, small ripples and irregularities that make the scene beyond waver slightly, as though viewed through water. The lower panes have begun to mist very faintly with condensation, the warmth of the kitchen meeting the cold of the glass, and creating that film of moisture that will grow heavier as the night progresses. But for now the view is still largely clear, and we can see with reasonable distinctness what lies within. The kitchen is not large. By modern standards, it would be considered quite small, perhaps 12 feet wide and 14 feet deep, with a ceiling that slopes slightly where it meets the outer wall. But by the standards of its time and place, for a household of this class, it is adequate, large enough to contain the necessary equipment and to allow one or two people to work comfortably, not so large that it becomes difficult to heat or impossible to keep clean. The walls are painted a pale cream color, though years of cooking have darkened them in places, particularly near the range where smoke and grease have left their marks despite regular washing. The paint is not new. It was probably applied several years ago, and in the corners and along the edges where wall meets ceiling, it has begun to yellow and crack slightly. But it is not actively peeling or damaged, not in need of urgent attention, simply aging gracefully, as paint does in a house that is well maintained but not wealthy enough for constant renovation. The lower portion of the walls, from the floor to about waist height, is covered with wooden paneling, what the Victorians call wainscoting, painted white or perhaps a very pale gray, though the color is difficult to distinguish precisely in the dim light. This paneling serves a practical purpose, protecting the plastered walls from the inevitable kicks and scuffs and splashes that occur in a working kitchen, and it also serves an aesthetic purpose, giving the room a more finished, more intentional appearance than bare walls would provide. The floor is stone, large rectangular tiles of gray slate or perhaps limestone, fitted closely together and worn smooth by decades of foot traffic. In some places, near the sink and the range, the stone has become discolored by water and heat, but it is clean, visibly clean, scrubbed regularly with soap and water, and probably sand as well, to remove stains and maintain that surface that, if not gleaming, is at least respectable, at least in keeping with the standards of cleanliness that Victorian householders, particularly those of the middle class, prize so highly. The range itself dominates one wall of the kitchen. It is a substantial piece of equipment. This range, a large black iron structure that serves multiple purposes: heating the room, heating water, and providing the means for cooking. It consists of a central grate where the coal fire burns, flanked on either side by iron ovens, and above the grate is a flat cooking surface, several square feet of cast iron that radiates heat and provides space for pots and kettles. The whole assembly stands on short iron legs and is fitted with various doors, dampers, and vents that allow the user to regulate the fire's intensity and direct the heat to where it is most needed. The range has been in use today. Certainly, it is used every day, and though the main cooking for the evening meal was completed hours ago, a fire still burns in the grate. Visible through the bars is a bed of glowing coals, red and orange, giving off steady heat. This fire will be maintained through the night, banked down but not extinguished, so that in the morning it can be revived quickly without the laborious process of laying and lighting a new fire from scratch. Coal is expensive. Fuel must be conserved, but the convenience of having a fire always ready, always able to boil water or warm food at short notice, outweighs the expense of keeping a small fire burning continuously. Above the range, a wooden shelf has been attached to the wall, and on this shelf rest several copper pots, their interiors bright from regular polishing with sand and vinegar, their exteriors darkened by soot and heat, their bases blackened from contact with a hot iron of the cooking surface. These pots are not decorative items, not displayed here for their beauty, but working equipment, kept ready for immediate use, and their arrangement on the shelf is purely practical. The most frequently used within easy reach, the others pushed farther back. To the left of the range stands a tall cupboard, perhaps 6 feet high, painted white to match the wainscoting below. It has 2 doors, fitted with simple brass latches. And through the gap between the doors, we can just make out shelves within, stacked with plates and bowls, cups and saucers, all the everyday crockery of the household. Nothing fine or valuable, simply the serviceable earthenware and plain white china that middle-class families use for their daily meals, reserving any finer pieces they may possess for special occasions and keeping them safely stored in the dining room upstairs. To the right of the range, a work table stands against the wall. This is not an elegant piece of furniture, but a purely functional one. Built of plain deal, its surface scrubbed pale from years of use and worn slightly concave in the center where countless rounds of chopping and kneading and rolling have taken their toll. The table has a single drawer beneath, probably containing knives and other small tools, and beneath the drawer, a lower shelf where bowls and basins are stored. The table's legs are thick and sturdy, showing none of the turning or decorative shaping that might be found on furniture meant for the public rooms of the house, because this is a working table, meant to endure hard use, and any ornament will be not only unnecessary, but actively detrimental, creating crevices where dirt could accumulate and making the table harder to keep clean. In the center of the room stands another table, smaller than the work table, perhaps 4 feet by 3, with a plain wooden top and simple straight legs. This is where the actual work of the evening takes place. The polishing and mending and small tasks that must be completed after the main cooking and cleaning are finished. A single wooden chair is drawn up to this table, a plain ladder-back chair with a woven rush seat, the kind of chair found in thousands of kitchens across England, inexpensive to purchase, sturdy enough to last for years, comfortable enough for prolonged sitting without being so comfortable as to encourage idleness. At this table, in this chair, a woman sits. Her back is toward us. We see her only in profile or from behind, never face on. And she's engaged in a task that seems to require her full attention, though it is not a complicated task, not something that demands skill or training, simply one of the many small maintenance tasks that make up the domestic routine of a Victorian household. She's perhaps 30 years old, though it is difficult to judge with certainty from our limited view. She might be younger. The harsh work of domestic service ages people prematurely. Or she might be older, her relative youth preserved by the fact that she has always had adequate food and shelter, that she has never been exposed to the absolute deprivation that characterizes the lives of the truly poor. Her dress is dark, gray or brown, or perhaps a dull blue, the color indistinct in the lamplight, and over it she wears a large white apron that covers her from chest to knees, its ties wrapped around her waist and knotted in back. The apron is clean, or at least it was clean when she put on this morning, though by now it bears the inevitable marks of a day's work. A spot of grease here, a smudge of coal dust there, a damp patch where she dried her hands after washing dishes. Her sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms that are reddened and slightly chapped from constant immersion in water, from scrubbing and washing and rinsing in both hot and cold water throughout the day. Her hands, which we can see clearly as they move through their task, are the hands of someone who works with them constantly, the skin roughened, the knuckles slightly swollen, the fingernails cut short and scrubbed clean, but showing none of the careful maintenance that the hands of a lady would receive. Her hair, dark in color though whether brown or black is impossible to say in this light, is pinned up beneath a white cap, that simple cloth cap that all domestic servants wear, that mark of their station and their role. A few strands have come loose during the day's work, and curl around her face, but she seems not to notice or perhaps not to care, her attention focused on the task before her rather than on her appearance. The task itself is simple enough. She is polishing silver spoons. Before her on the table lies a small pile of spoons, perhaps 10 or 12 of them, and in her hand she holds a soft cloth, and she is working her way through the pile one spoon at a time, lifting each in turn, rubbing it carefully on both sides, examining it briefly to ensure that the tarnish has been removed and the metal has regained what shine it possesses, and then setting it aside on a clean towel that has been folded and placed to her right for this purpose. The movements are methodical, repetitive, performed without haste, but also without any particular care or attention. This is not work that requires thought. Her hands know what to do without instruction from her conscious mind, and her attention, such as it is, seems to wander elsewhere, her gaze unfocused, her expression neither contented nor discontent, but rather blank, neutral, the expression of someone whose mind has gone elsewhere, while the body continues its automatic movements. Lift, rub the front, turn, rub the back, examine briefly, set aside, reach for the next spoon, repeat. The rhythm is steady, unhurried, almost meditative in its regularity. Each spoon takes perhaps 30 seconds from lifting to setting aside, perhaps 45 seconds if the tarnish is particularly stubborn, and in this way, minute by minute, the pile of unpolished spoons diminishes while the stack of polished ones grows, until eventually, inevitably, the task will be complete and she can move on to the next thing. What is she thinking as she performs this task? We cannot know. Her face, seen only in profile and at a distance, in dim light, and through imperfect glass, reveals nothing. She might be thinking about the work that remains to be done tonight. She might be thinking about the family upstairs, about whether the master will ring for anything before bed, whether the baby will wake and need attention, whether the mistress will find something to criticize tomorrow. She might be thinking about her own past, about her childhood in some village or smaller town, about the family she left behind when she entered domestic service, about the life she might have had if circumstances had been different. Or she might be thinking about nothing at all. The mind, when freed from the need to direct complex tasks, often simply empties, entering a state of restful blankness that is not quite sleep, but not quite full wakefulness either, a kind of waking rest where time passes without being noticed, where the body continues its work while consciousness floats freely, unanchored, drifting like a boat on still water. We, watching from outside, cannot enter her thoughts. We can only observe her actions, watch as her hands move through their practiced routine, note the slight slump of her shoulders that speaks of fatigue, the occasional small shift in her position as she seeks to ease some discomfort, the way her head tilts slightly to one side, as though listening for sounds from elsewhere in the house. The lamp that illuminates her work sits on the table beside her, a simple oil lamp with a glass chimney and a brass base, its wick turned low to conserve fuel, producing a soft yellow light that barely reaches the corners of the room, leaving the upper portions of the walls and the ceiling lost in shadow. This is not a brightly lit workspace. The Victorians, practical in their economy, use only as much light as is necessary for the task at hand, and for polishing spoons in the evening, this dim lamp is deemed sufficient. The lamp's chimney shows signs of soot, a thin black film on the inside of the glass that slightly dims the light. In a well-managed household, lamp chimneys would be washed daily. But in a household like this one, where there are few servants and much work, such tasks might be attended to only once a week, or even less frequently, and so the lamp burns somewhat less brightly than it would if properly maintained, contributing to the overall dimness of the scene. Beside the lamp, casting shadows that stretch and shift with the flame's small movements, sit a few other objects. A small tin, probably containing the polishing compound used on the silver. A water glass, half full, that the woman has brought down with her from upstairs, or perhaps filled at the kitchen sink earlier in the evening. A folded apron, perhaps a spare, or perhaps the one she will wear tomorrow, laid neatly aside. These objects, mundane and unremarkable in themselves, become in this context part of a larger composition, elements in the still life that the kitchen presents to our observing eyes. How long has she been sitting here? We cannot know, having arrived only recently ourselves, stepping into this observation with no knowledge of what came before. Perhaps she has been polishing spoons for only 5 minutes, having just begun the task after completing some other work. Or perhaps she has been at it for half an hour or more, the work taking longer than expected, the tarnish more stubborn than usual, her tiredness making each movement slower than it might otherwise be. But eventually, inevitably, the task approaches its completion. The pile of unpolished spoons has dwindled to 3, then 2, then 1. She lifts the final spoon, rubs it with the cloth, turns it, rubs the other side, examines it briefly in the lamplight, and then sets it aside with the others. For a moment she remains still, her hands resting on the table, her gaze directed downward at the completed work. There is no sense of satisfaction in her posture, no visible pleasure in the accomplishment, but neither is there any sign of frustration or unhappiness. There is simply completion. The task is done. She draws a breath. We can see her shoulders rise and fall, and then she gathers the polished spoons together, wrapping them carefully in the clean towel, and rises from her chair. The movement is slow, stiff, as though her body protests after sitting motionless for so long, as though the simple act of standing requires more effort than it should. She pauses for a moment after rising, her hand resting on the table as if to steady herself, and then she turns and moves toward the white cupboard. The cupboard door opens with a faint creak. We cannot hear it, but we can imagine it. That particular sound that old hinges make, metal rubbing against metal, a sound so familiar in old houses that it becomes part of the building's voice, part of its personality. She places the wrapped bundle of spoons inside, setting it carefully on one of the shelves, arranging it with a care that suggests these spoons, however humble, are not without value, must be protected and preserved, must not be treated carelessly. Then she closes the door, and the spoons disappear from view, and that task, at least, is complete. But the evening is not over. There are other tasks waiting, other small rituals that must be completed before she can finally retire to her room in the attic and surrender to sleep. She stands for a moment by the cupboard, her hands still resting on the door, her head slightly bowed, as though gathering strength or simply taking a brief rest between one task and the next. Then she straightens, turns, and moves back across the kitchen toward the range. Let us watch as she continues, as the evening's routines unfold, as the small tasks are completed one by one, as the kitchen moves slowly toward that final moment when the lamp will be extinguished and darkness will claim the room and the day will finally, truly be over. The woman moves toward the range with that same unhurried pace, her footsteps barely audible on the stone floor, even to someone inside the room. Certainly inaudible to us standing outside in the cold darkness of the alley. Her movements have a quality of inevitability about them, as though she is following a script written long ago, performing action she has performed countless times before and will perform countless times again, each repetition wearing a groove deeper into the pattern of her life. She reaches the range and stands before it for a moment, looking down at the glowing coals visible through the bars of the grate. The fire has burned down considerably since the main cooking was completed hours ago, but it has not gone out, and the coals still radiate a substantial heat that we can almost feel even through the window, that deep, steady warmth that coal produces, different in quality from the quick, bright heat of burning wood, more sustained, more reliable, though also more difficult to kindle in the first place. The woman reaches for the poker, a long iron rod that hangs from a hook beside the range, and with careful, practiced movements she opens the fire door and begins to bank the coals for the night. This is a task that requires judgment, not just mechanical action. Too little attention, and the fire will burn itself out completely during the night, requiring someone to rise early and spend half an hour coaxing a new fire into being. Too much enthusiasm in arranging the coals, too much air allowed to reach them, and they will burn too quickly, consuming fuel wastefully and perhaps becoming dangerously hot. What she does is this. She uses the poker to draw the still glowing coals toward the center of the grate, pushing aside the ash and clinker that accumulate around the edges, creating a compact bed of living fire. Then she takes a small brass shovel, its handle worn smooth by years of use, and carefully adds a few pieces of fresh coal to the pile. Not too many, just enough to sustain the fire through the long hours of darkness. These new pieces of coal are placed with care, positioned so that they will catch from the existing coals without smothering them, so that they will burn slowly and steadily rather than flaring up into wasteful flame. Once the new coal is in place, she adjusts the dampers, closing them most of the way to restrict the flow of air to the fire, slowing its combustion to the minimum necessary to keep it alive. This is a delicate balance, learned through experience rather than instruction, and different fires in different ranges require slightly different treatment, so that what works perfectly in one house might fail completely in another. But this woman knows this range, knows its temperament and its quirks, knows how it behaves when the wind is from the east, and when it comes from the west, knows how much coal it needs, and how much air and how to coax from it exactly the performance required. The fire thus arranged, she closes the iron door with a soft clang, a sound that carries a quality of finality, of completion, as though in closing that door, she is also closing the day itself, sealing away the activities and concerns of the waking hours and preparing the house for its nightly rest. She replaces the poker and the shovel on their hooks, and then she stands for a moment with her hands resting on the range's surface, feeling its warmth radiating up through the iron, warming her palms and her wrists and traveling up her forearms, easing the constant low-level ache that comes from a day spent in labor. How many times has she stood like this? We might wonder, warming her hands on this range at the end of a long day. Hundreds, certainly. Perhaps thousands, if she has been in this household for several years, if her employment has been steady and her position secure. Each evening brings her to this same spot, to this same moment of warmth and rest before the final tasks of the night. And tomorrow evening she will stand here again, and the evening after that, and the evening after that, until eventually either she moves to another position or the household circumstances change or age makes it impossible for her to continue in service, and she must find some other way to live, some other means of supporting herself. But those are concerns for the future, and the future is not yet here. Tonight, this evening, she has only these tasks to complete, this routine to follow, these few remaining actions before she can finally climb the narrow stairs to her attic room and lie down on her narrow bed and close her eyes and let sleep claim her. She moves away from the range, crossing to the sink that stands beneath the window, the very window through which we observe her. For a moment she is very close to us, separated only by the thickness of the glass and the fundamental barrier between observer and observed, between the watcher and the watched. If she were to look up, to glance out the window, she might see us standing here in the darkness, might see the faint outline of figure in the alley, though more likely she would see only her own reflection, dim and ghostly, overlaid on the darkness beyond. But she does not look up. Her attention remains focused on the tasks before her, and her gaze is directed downward at the stone sink, at the wooden draining board beside it, at the few items that remain to be cleaned and put away before the kitchen can be considered properly settled for the night. The sink itself is a large rectangular basin carved from a single piece of stone, probably limestone, its interior surfaces worn smooth by decades of use, its corners slightly rounded. A single brass tap protrudes from the wall above it, cold water only. Hot water must be heated on the range and carried in kettles or pans, and beneath the sink, hidden by a short curtain of oilcloth, the drain pipe descends into the darkness, carrying wastewater away to the sewers that are one of Victorian London's great, if largely invisible, achievements. On the draining board sit several items: a teacup and saucer, a small plate, a spoon. These are from a mistress's evening tea, taken upstairs in the sitting room several hours ago and brought down again by the maid, where she came to check that the kitchen was in order before retiring to her own bed. The woman, we still do not know her name, and we will not learn it, for she exists in this narrative only as presence and action, not as a person with history and identity. Reaches for these items now, lifting the cup and examining it briefly in the lamplight. The cup is white china, plain and undecorated, serviceable rather than beautiful, part of the household's everyday set rather than any finer pieces that might be kept for company. A faint brown stain from the tea marks the interior, and the woman sets the cup down briefly while she reaches for a cloth and moistens it under the cold tap, then picks up the cup again and wipes the interior clean, removing the stain with practiced efficiency. The saucer and spoon require less attention. The saucer held no tea and bears no mark. The spoon was already clean when the tray was brought down, but she wipes them both anyway, ensuring that everything is perfectly clean before it is put away. This attention to thoroughness, this refusal to take shortcuts even in small things, even when she is tired and the hour is late, and no one would know if she left the cup with its faint stain or the spoon with a microscopic spot of tea dried on its bowl. This is the mark of someone who takes pride in her work, or perhaps simply someone who has learned through bitter experience that small neglects lead to large problems, that standards once relaxed are difficult to restore, that a reputation for. Carelessness, once established, is nearly impossible to overcome. Or perhaps she simply operates on instinct, following the patterns drilled into her during her early training, when she was a young girl new to service, learning the routines and rituals of domestic work under the stern eye of an older servant, learning that there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything, and that the right way must be followed always, without exception, without regard for whether one feels like it, or whether one is tired, or whether it seems, in the moment, to matter. Whatever her motivation, she completes the task thoroughly, wiping each piece clean, drying it with a second cloth kept for that purpose, and then carrying the items to the cupboard and placing them inside, arranging them carefully on the shelf so that they are ready for tomorrow's use, so that when morning comes and the tea tray must be prepared again, everything will be in its proper place, clean and ready, requiring no special effort, no searching or scrambling. The cupboard door closes again with that same faint creak, and the woman turns back to survey the kitchen, her gaze moving slowly across the room as though conducting an inspection, checking mentally against some internal list of requirements, ensuring that nothing has been forgotten, that no task remains undone. The range, properly banked, its fire adjusted for the night. The table, clear except for the lamp, the chair pushed back into place. The sink, clean and empty, no dishes waiting. The floor, swept earlier in the evening, though she will sweep it again tomorrow morning before the family rises, a daily ritual that prevents the accumulation of dirt and preserves the appearance of cleanliness that is so essential to a well-run household. Her inspection complete, she moves to the chair and lowers herself into it once more, not to resume work, but simply to rest for a moment before taking the final steps toward bed. This is a pause, a breathing space, a moment stolen from the relentless forward progression of tasks and duties and obligations. She sits very still, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze directed at nothing in particular. And in this stillness, we can see the weariness that she has been holding at bay all evening, the accumulated fatigue of a day that began before dawn and is only now, hours after the sun set, approaching its end. Her shoulders sag very slightly. Her head tilts forward, not quite resting on her chest, but tending in that direction. Her breathing, which we cannot hear, but can infer from the slight rise and fall of her shoulders, becomes deeper, slower, the breathing of someone allowing themselves, finally, to relax, to let go of the constant vigilance that service requires, the perpetual readiness to respond to bells and calls and unexpected demands. How long she sits like this, we cannot say. Time in this quiet kitchen, in this dim lamplight, seems to have loosened its usual strict progression, seems to have become elastic, expandable, so that what might be only 2 or 3 minutes of clock time feels longer, feels like a significant interval, a real rest rather than a mere pause. The clock continues its ticking. Certainly, that patient mechanical heartbeat that has been present throughout our observation, though we have not remarked on it until now, but its regular rhythm, rather than hurrying the moment along, instead seems to hold it in place, to create a steady framework, within which stillness can exist. Outside, beyond the window, the night continues its own progression. The gas lamps burn steadily in their pools of greenish-yellow light. The houses along the terrace stand dark and silent, their inhabitants settle for the night, curtains drawn, doors locked, the external world shut out until morning. No carriages pass. No footsteps echo on the pavement. The city, or at least this small corner of it, has fallen into that deep late evening quiet that precedes the even deeper quiet of the hours after midnight. A cat, perhaps, prowls somewhere in the darkness, making its nightly rounds of the gardens and alleyways, searching for mice or simply patrolling its territory according to those mysterious feline imperatives that govern its behavior. But if such a cat exists, it does not come near our window, does not disturb our observation, remains part of the unseen world that surrounds the small circle of visibility we have established. Inside the kitchen, the lamp flickers very slightly, a barely perceptible wavering of the flame that causes the shadows to shift and the light to dim for just an instant before recovering its previous steady glow. This small fluctuation is enough to catch the woman's attention, to draw her out of whatever reverie or blankness she had fallen into. She lifts her head, blinks, looks around as though momentarily uncertain of where she is, and then, recalled to herself and to her remaining duties, she rises from the chair with a small sound that might be a sigh. Though we cannot hear it, can only imagine it based on the movement of her shoulders and the expression that we think we can detect in her shadowed face. She reaches for the lamp, her hand going to the small brass knob that controls the wick, and she turns it, raising the flame very slightly, brightening the kitchen for just a moment, allowing herself this small increase in light to complete her final tasks. The room springs in a sharper relief, details that were hidden in shadow becoming briefly visible. The texture of the plastered ceiling, the individual boards of the wainscoting, the pattern of wear on the floor tiles near the range where decades of footsteps have polished the stone. With this increased light, she performs her final round of the kitchen, a circuit that takes her to each area in turn, checking, verifying, ensuring. She opens the door to the cupboard beneath the sink and verifies that the pail, kept there for scraps, is empty, that it was emptied earlier as it should have been. She checks the window latch, ensuring it is secure, that no draft can enter during the night. She verifies that the cloths used for cleaning are folded and placed in their proper location, ready for tomorrow's use. She adjusts the position of the chairs, pushing them fully under the table so that their straight backs are aligned, so that the room presents that sense of order and completeness that is the goal of all her labor. These small adjustments take only a minute or two, but they are performed with the same care and attention that characterized all the earlier tasks, with that same refusal to compromise or take shortcuts, that same adherence to standards that may seem excessive to modern eyes, but which represent, in their time and place, the difference between a well-managed household and a slovenly one, between a servant who can be relied upon and one who cannot, between respectability and its absence. The circuit complete, she returns to the lamp and this time turns the wick down, not all the way. She will leave a very small flame burning through the night, both as a practical measure in case someone needs light during the dark hours, and as a symbolic gesture, a refusal to let the kitchen fall into complete darkness, to let the heart of the house go entirely cold and lifeless, but low enough that the oil will last until morning, that the flame will burn steadily without attention, requiring no adjustment or replenishment until the new day begins. As the flame diminishes, the kitchen dims correspondingly, shadows advancing from the corners, the ceiling disappearing into darkness, the walls fading to vague presences, until only the immediate area around the lamp remains clearly visible, and even that visibility is compromised, softened, made uncertain by the weakness of the light. The range's glow, which was barely noticeable when the lamp burned brighter, now becomes more prominent, its red warmth providing a second source of illumination, painting the wall behind it with a faint ruddy glow that pulses slightly as the coals settle and shift. The woman stands for a moment longer, looking around the dimmed kitchen, perhaps conducting one final mental check, perhaps simply allowing herself one last pause before leaving the room and climbing the narrow servant's stairs to her attic bedroom. Her face, what we can see of it in this diminished light, shows no particular expression, no satisfaction at having completed the day's work, no anticipation of rest, no visible emotion at all. Only that same neutral blankness that has characterized her throughout our observation, that quality of being present without quite being there, of performing actions without investing them with obvious feeling. Then she unties her apron, lifting the strings over her head and folding the garment carefully, smoothing the fabric and aligning the edges before laying it over the back of the chair, where it will wait for tomorrow morning, when she will put it on again and begin the next day's round of tasks. Without the apron, her dress is revealed in its entirety. A simple dark garment of wool or heavy cotton, long-sleeved, high-necked, reaching to the floor, utterly plain and unadorned, chosen for durability and practicality rather than any aesthetic consideration, the uniform of her class and her occupation. She moves toward the door that leads to the servants' stairs, that narrow ascending passage that connects the basement kitchen to the upper floors of the house. And as she reaches it, she pauses once more, her hand on the door frame, and looks back at the kitchen one final time. Perhaps this is a habit, this final glance, a way of ensuring that nothing has been forgotten, that the room is truly ready for the night. Or perhaps it is something else, something less practical and more human, a moment of acknowledgement, a small farewell to the space where she has spent so many hours, a recognition that however humble and utilitarian this kitchen may be, it is nevertheless the center of her working life, the place where she passes most of her waking hours, and, as such, deserves this moment of attention, this small gesture of regard. Whatever her reason, she looks, and we look with her, seeing what she sees. The dim lamp on the table, its flame reduced to a small golden bead of light. The glowing range with its banked fire breathing warmth into the room. The cupboards and shelves and work surfaces, all tidy and ordered, waiting in their proper arrangement for tomorrow's resumption of activity. The stone floor, clean and bare. The white painted wainscoting. The cream walls fading into shadow. The whole small domestic space suspended in that particular quality of late evening stillness, neither abandoned nor occupied, simply existing in its own patient continuity. And then she turns away, and her form disappears through the doorway, and we hear, or rather we imagine we hear, for we are outside in the cold alley and cannot truly hear sounds from within the house. The soft sound of her footsteps ascending the stairs, growing fainter as she climbs higher, until they fade entirely and she is gone, somewhere in the upper regions of the house, making her way through narrow passages and up steep staircases to that small room under the eaves where her bed waits. We remain at the window. The kitchen remains visible, unchanged by her departure, except for the absence of her presence, that central animating force that gave purpose and direction to all that we observed. Now the room is merely a stage after the actors have left, a set waiting for the next performance. And in this emptiness, this cessation of activity, there is a quality that is neither sad nor peaceful, but something in between, something that acknowledges the essential loneliness of inanimate objects, their patient existence in the absence of human attention. The lamp continues to burn, that small, faithful flame. The fire continues to glow in its bed of coals. The clock continues its steady ticking, measuring out the seconds and the minutes with mechanical indifference. These things continue because that is their nature, because they are designed to continue, to perform their functions without regard for whether anyone is present to observe them, without need for appreciation or acknowledgement. And perhaps it is what makes this scene, this quiet kitchen in its late evening stillness, so conducive to rest, so appropriate as a companion to sleep. It asks nothing of us. It demands no response, no engagement, no emotional investment. It simply exists, continues, persists, offering its small, constant presences, the lamp, the fire, the ticking clock, as anchors for our drifting attention, as gentle touchstones to which we can return if our thoughts begin to race or worry or plan. Let your own room, the room where you lie now, take on some of this kitchen's quality. Let the objects around you, your bedside table, your lamp or clock, the walls and ceiling and floor, become present to you in the same way, not as urgent concerns requiring action, but as patient presences keeping their vigil, accompanying your rest without demanding anything of you. Let your breathing continue its steady rhythm, in and out, like the lamp's steady burning, like the fire's steady glow. Let your thoughts, if you have thoughts, drift without particular direction, moving across the surface of your mind like clouds across a night sky, appearing and dissolving, leaving no trace, requiring no response. The kitchen will remain here through the night, its lamp burning low, its fire glowing in the darkness, its orderly surfaces waiting for morning. You need not watch over it. You need not maintain your attention. You can let go now, can release your grip on wakefulness, can allow the darkness behind your closed eyes to deepen and spread, can let the weight of your body in your bed become complete, can surrender to the inevitable pull of sleep that has been tugging at you gently throughout this quiet observation. Tomorrow the woman will return. She will rise in the cold darkness of the winter morning, will dress quickly in her small room, will descend those narrow stairs and enter the kitchen again, will revive the fire and fill the kettle and begin the day's first tasks. But that is tomorrow, and tomorrow is not yet here. Tonight, there is only this, the dim lamp, the glowing fire, the ticking clock, and the deep, patient stillness of a house at rest. A stillness that extends outward from this one kitchen to encompass all the houses along this terrace, all the streets of this district, all of London sleeping under its heavy sky, all the world turning slowly through its ancient round of darkness and light. Now sleep. Let the image of the kitchen fade. Let the window disappear. Let the gas lamps on the street dim and fade away. Immerse yourself in your own darkness, your own warmth, your own rest. The lamp continues to burn without you. The fire blazes without you watching. The night goes on, but you don't need to. Thank you so much for spending this quiet evening with me. If you found peace in these gentle observations, we would love for you to subscribe, like, and comment for perhaps more calming and restful sleep journeys. And if you wish, Leave a quiet comment below to let me know where in the world you will fall asleep tonight. Remember, tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life. Good night.